Good afternoon and welcome to Just Jocelyn. I have a great guest today. It's Miss Donna Judge, and she has a different hat on today. We're going to be talking about election integrity in New Hampshire. And I know you're all cringing and saying, oh, Jocelyn, what are you doing? But if you've been paying attention, there's been an awful lot of postcards being mailed. There's been an awful lot of give us money envelopes being sent to your house. Gimme, 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 gimme. There's been a lot of polling where they ask you loaded questions. I don't know about you, but I let them drone on and then I go, well, actually, this is what I feel and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not going to answer that question because there's only one answer and I'm not going to answer it the way you want it to. So yeah, they hang up on me or I hang up on them. So that's fun too. But we just had the Iowa caucus this past Monday in Iowa. It was a Republican caucus, which meant Republican voters were there to choose their candidate, to caucus for their candidate. And there were several videos that came out the afternoon into the night because they closed the doors at 6 p.m. so that the caucusers could come in. They lined up all day. It was freezing cold, 40 below, some of the worst weather. But they all got out there because it was very important to them. It was their civic duty. They knew that they needed to do this. It was very important, so they did. And Mercedes Schlepp did an interview, and it really knocked me for a loop because it's exactly, which we'll talk about in a little bit, about a federal case in New Hampshire, and there's three of us that brought it forward, and it was the exact same problem. Iowa is a Republican caucus, and the primary this coming Tuesday is to pick the Republican presidential candidate. So it's a Republican primary. And we have issues. They had in Iowa, they had the issue of people were allowed to change party affiliation up until 6 p.m. of the day. So undecideds were allowed to come and vote. Democrats could become undecided and come and vote in a Republican caucus. Same things happened here in New Hampshire. And it doesn't matter which way it's going. If it was going to the Democrat way, if it was going to go that way, I don't think it's right that Republican people become undeclared to go mess in that primary or that caucus. So it doesn't matter which way it goes. State law says that there's a cutoff date and you must abide by that cutoff date. Well, in New Hampshire, they didn't. So that's the crux of the problem. So that all happened on Monday, which led me to start going back and looking at cases, looking at information. What is actually going on? What have we gone through for the past 6 years? What are we missing? Why are we trusting everything and not questioning? So I called my good friend, Miss Donna Judge. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And I said, let's talk about this. And let's not stand on the shoulders of other people that have come before us. Let's give credit where credit is due. And perhaps enlighten everybody to what do we need to be looking for. Let's keep it simple. You know me, everybody. I don't use big words. I explain everything. Kindergarten, it's not because I think anybody's dumb, but none of us have the time to analyze this and study it. Tuesday's coming, and we've got town elections coming in March and April. You're a supervisor of the checklist.
Yes.
So, you can help all of us. What do we need to be looking for? What are we questioning? We're not going out saying this is all wrong and this is illegal, but there is stuff that's all wrong and illegal. What do we need to look for? How do we deal with this? How do we be an informed voter? That's a loaded question.
Wow. Okay.
Where would you like to start?
Goodness. Okay. So we are guaranteed the right to vote in our state constitution. Mm-hmm. And all of our voting rights come from the New Hampshire state constitution.
Correct.
They don't come from the federal constitution. The federal constitution was written later as a prohibition against the federal government infringing upon our rights that were already guaranteed
Correct.
in our state constitution.
Correct.
Okay. And then we started having federal elections for federal offices. So those are conducted at the state level, but they are also controlled by federal laws and regulations.
Right.
So we have a double layer there with the federal elections.
Federal elections being presidential, federal Congress, and federal Senate.
Right.
Okay.
And it also includes the primaries,
Yes.
which should be conducted by the individual political parties.
So in a way, you could call it private.
You could. And states like Iowa, at least the way I have seen it in past media reports, is they would get together locally, regionally, in a private meeting, by party, and if you were a Democrat, you weren't allowed in. It had
And vice
to be
versa,
a
right?
Republican going into the Republican caucus, a Democrat going into the Democratic caucus, and quite frankly, until this year, I wasn't aware that independents and undeclared voters were allowed to go into the caucuses. I thought you
Correct.
had to
Or
be
primaries,
a
yeah.
registered,
I thought so too.
you had to be registered with one of the parties. So I've had experience with the New Hampshire primary ever since I was a 20-something working at WMUR TV doing coverage of the event.
Right. So you really got a totally different view.
I got a completely different view of the process and the event from what I see now as an elected election official.
So just to digress just a little bit, what is the differences that you see? What is glaring, just like OMG, yikes, good, bad, or indifferent, but hugely different?
Hugely different. I think
I mean, I can guess the money is that pours in is ginormous.
Yeah, ginormous. I mean, when you work for essentially the only major television station in New Hampshire that's affiliated with a national network, ABC, you get a unique perspective of the amount of nationwide attention that comes to New Hampshire every 4 years, the amount of money that's getting poured into the state, not only by the candidates trying to encourage voters to vote for them. I've seen so many events leading up to this primary with candidates saying, hey, come to my barbecue, come to this, beer tasting, come to this, come to that, come to this breakfast. And yes, it's an encouragement, it's a bribe to go out and meet the candidates. And New Hampshire primary was always about coming here, meeting the public getting to meet the candidates, getting to shake hands, getting to ask the sticky questions.
Correct.
Directly, and not have to go through
multi-layered
media advisors and whatnot. And now I'm seeing candidates who aren't even showing up in the state.
Yeah.
You've got this almost dichotomy between the candidate mindsets and the campaigns. You've got the ones who've been here on the ground since the beginning and, pouring a lot of money in, meeting a lot of people,
Spending the time.
honing their stump speech.
Yeah.
And then you've got the ones who kind of phone it in and just do the postcards and the mailers.
Yeah. And then you have the ones that are totally media driven, who've done very little of the groundwork.
Right. Right. And I don't know, the population has changed a little bit. They are on their devices all the time. They do see the media. They don't seem to need or want to meet the candidates in person as much as I remember.
And I think that's partially the social media, the phones, the iPads.
Exactly.
And I don't need to, and they can't have conversations with each other anyway. They're always texting. So that's a lost art, I would say,
Right.
part of.
Right.
And apparently they feel they can judge a book by its cover, and we all know that's not the best thing to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So let's talk about, let's go back a few years and let's talk about what things started to go wrong. What started to go wrong that woke different people at different levels? What annoyed them? What made them question, is this right? Is this true? Did this really happen? How do I fix this? I mean, there's a ton of questions.
Right.
And to me, in my opinion, the first time that I really had a panic attack and said, oh gosh, this is really wrong.
Something's not right
Something's
in
not
Denmark.
right here. I'm not
Right.
entirely sure what it is.
Yep.
And I discovered it. And then immediately it expanded and exploded to a whole
Right.
bunch of people. So it must have all happened to a bunch of people at the same time. And that was the original Wyndham election.
Right. Yes.
And we heard about the discrepancies and how the machines were off
Right,
and
right.
the recount and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to keep it really generic. And the AccuVote Dominion machines. And I'm like, oh, you mean those little counting
the
machines?
black
that just,
thing
the
you
thing
slide,
you stick
yeah,
your, what's
right.
wrong with that?
Yeah.
That just counts the ballots for us.
I mean, we all took standardized tests in school. We filled in the oval with a number 2 pencil.
Yeah. What's
had
the
to make
big
sure,
deal? I don't
no.
understand.
Our grades were always right, you know.
Yeah, and
we
to
thought.
find out that these machines weren't counting correctly, that there were all sorts of different things that could happen to the ballots, that some of them were folded, some of them weren't folded, some were folded in the right place, some were folded in the wrong place. Some people fill out the whole circle, some people put an X. Fill in the circle, people. No excuse, okay? Fill in the circle. Just saying. This is a public service announcement. Please, for recount purposes, fill in the circle properly.
And if
And
you
count.
if you have trouble with your eyesight or if you have shaky hands, you are allowed to ask for help. I mean, that is one of your guaranteed rights. If you physically cannot fill out a ballot, you can ask for help.
Correct.
Do it.
Do it. Exactly. And an X doesn't count. X does not mark the spot. You're just
No.
messing up everything for a recount in the eyes on the ballots if there's a problem. So I'm immediately like, oh, okay, so did the power go out? Did some nitwit kick out the plug and they had to plug it back in and they had to reset? Was it daylight savings time? I just could not fathom at all that there was something amiss, that there was some tomfoolery, that somebody changed the program. It's stuff you hear about, but you don't think about it in your own backyard. So immediately I go back and that day, and I'm watching the counting, and I'm watching them open up the machines, and I'm watching these guys like kneeling on the ground saying, really, this is the best we've got? Picking up these ballots, stuffing them in a box, they're taping these boxes, they're putting these boxes into a room, and I'm like,
Yep. Okay. So in other industries, it's called security theater. And they are trying to maintain the illusion that everything's good, everything's secure, we're going to put the tape on the box and nobody's going to tamper with the ballots, and this is the way we're supposed to do it. Okay, this is
hey.
our book, the Election Procedure Manual, okay?
I think you could build some muscle with that.
You could. And I will freely admit I have not read through this every single page, word for word. But this is our guidance for how to conduct elections based on this book, which is all of the RSAs in New Hampshire that pertain to election law.
Wow.
Okay? So everybody receives training when they are elected to become an election official from the Secretary of State's office.
Okay. And I know as a ballot clerk, I receive
Yes.
training. And as a supervisor, I'm sure you receive a lot more training.
And we do. We have to sit through some very long, boring presentations, but that's okay. That's part of our job. That's what we signed on for. And we all took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution.
Did you hear that, people? Swear an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire.
Yes.
I believe as a ballot clerk, we do both. We also do an oath. I think there's 2 oaths on the paper.
Yep.
It's a big deal. Too many people just swear it and think it's, they can do whatever with it. If
Right.
you're truly a patriot and an American and you want to follow the law, that's a big deal. And when you break that oath of office, it's treason. There's no other way to describe it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And we have to get this into our heads that the officials must follow their oath of office and uphold the Constitution. And I think this is where we are having huge problems.
And quite frankly, they mean well. They want to do well. They want to do their jobs well. They don't appreciate when activists come into their window and start waving pieces of paper and saying, I'm filing this against you and you're violating the Constitution. They may not have read the Constitution from start to finish, but they do honestly in their heart of hearts think that they're doing the right thing because that's what they were trained to do.
Correct.
But
So why would we question it?
a lot of these laws in this book are repugnant and contrary to the Constitution of the state. They've veered off course. They're trying to make it fair for everybody. They're trying to get as many voters involved as possible. But in doing so,
they're going against the Constitution.
exactly, and they don't want to hear it.
No, they don't. So fast forward the original Wyndham recount. So everybody went to their towns that were concerned. I did. I went to my town and I asked for, I call them the tally tapes. That's the ticker tape, the white tape that comes out of the machines. You have one at the beginning that's 0, and sometimes they do one during the day and another one at the end of the day. But either way, you've got these tapes. They're extremely long. And it tells you how many people voted for who and what position, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So I got them. I was so proud of myself. And I went home and said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with these. Because there were no instructions. So I got a giant piece of cardboard and I taped them side by side, lined them up, and put it on the wall. And I stood there and stared at it and said, I don't know what I'm looking for.
Right.
But I looked at it, and within 10, 15 minutes, I started looking at going, wait a minute. These machines, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait a minute, that date doesn't match that date. That time doesn't match that time. And I mean, we're not talking a few minutes off because you start each machine. Everybody doesn't stand there and go, ready, set, go, start the machines. They do them consecutively. So, but you're talking a minute or two, not an hour, not 4 hours. And I'm looking at these going, oh my God.
And some of them were different calendar dates, weren't they?
Correct. Different calendar dates. One of our tapes was 10 days earlier than the election.
Well,
10
that's suspicious, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's a mistake, Jocelyn. Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sorry.
Right, right.
This is constitutionally guaranteed free and fair elections. No fiddle diddling going around. No this.
Yep.
And what we found out was from town to town to town to city to town, there were all sorts of anomalies, all sorts of things that do not match.
Right.
Different programs, different times, different dates, patterns of numbers. First 2 machines, really close, third machine way off. Oh, well, that's where they put the absentee ballots. That's another subject for another time.
That's another whole show.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you would see, so I started going through and I just made a little chart. I'm not a brainiac. I'm not anything. I just look for patterns.
Yep.
And I noticed this machine was exactly double all the counts on this machine. And I found the third machine was like all over the place. And I went through and it was exact on every single solitary candidate. So we find out there's a nice gal, Marilyn Todd, and she is an accountant. She did Hudson, she did Nashua, all these people. Somehow we got her name and we all started calling her. And we had this giant meeting and everybody came together with these tapes and said, we don't understand this, what's wrong? She did a deep dive into it and found absolutely the most insane outcomes. We found out about memory cards that were supposed to be kept for 22 months if it was a federal election, and they weren't. They were being sent back to a private company that automatically erased them and reprogrammed them for the town election, which followed.
Right.
So that was the very, very first case. And Marilyn, is the one that woke us all up to these machines, in which case then we had other officials in Wyndham that joined in, Ken Eyring and Tom Murray and a few others that just blew this open and it went nationwide. To me, that was the very first time that I was aware that there was cheating going on, that there was integrity problems. And it was throughout the state, which blew open the doors for what was going on with these machines across the nation.
And even if it's not intentional fraud
Still
or
happened.
cheating, the machines are old. The machines have been modified 6 ways to Sunday. Their certification has been broken. They may have started out as devices that were certified by Underwriter Laboratories or whichever scientific group proved that this machinery was safe to be used by human beings in a workplace. But by opening it up, by modifying
The parts.
the parts inside, by
Just maintenance.
taking out modems, putting in new cards, new chips,
Clocks.
clocks, rollers, diverters, different hardware, different software, different firmware. Who knows what machine is running on what? They're supposed to keep logs of
Correct.
every time they do maintenance. But, you town officials don't know what's going on exactly.
It's just maintenance.
It's just maintenance.
Okay.
They don't, and I think, some people think that this kind of work is above their pay grade and they're going to, outsource it to the maintenance techs from LHS or wherever they're coming from. And I know people in my town have said to me, well, I trust a machine more than I trust my eyes after working 12-hour days at the polls.
Okay, don't we go back to where? Show me in the Constitution that you are given the authority to purchase these machines, use these machines. There isn't. And therein lies the problem, and that's where the arguments all come from.
Right. So New Hampshire is not a home rule state. We're a Dillon rule state. So that means, in a nutshell, that towns cannot make their own rules. Only the state legislature can pass laws.
Okay.
So in 1979, a law was passed and enacted saying that, you individual towns, you can decide if you want to try these brand new whiz-bang ballot counting machines on a temporary trial basis. That was over 40 years ago.
Yep. When did the trial end, and how long have we been paying for these machines?
Where's the money coming from? Why did no one ever modify the Constitution, amend it to allow for these machines to count the votes, like Massachusetts did?
Correct.
They did it properly. They had a constitutional amendment on the ballot. The people voted to allow for electronic machines
but they
to count
have
their
not
ballots.
done that in New Hampshire.
They have not done that in New Hampshire. No. And so as it stands right now, according to the Constitution, the moderator shall sort and count
the votes.
The
That
votes.
means 2 ayes, and it has to be verified. It has to be ayes on the ballots.
Yes, and
a
it has to
machine
be,
is not ayes, and it can't. If there's a problem, the machine cannot go to court and say, "Ooh, but Your Honor, blah 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 blah." That's only the moderator that can do that.
correct. And a machine cannot swear an affidavit.
Correct.
It's not a human being. It cannot attest to the veracity of its count.
Correct.
Only the moderator can.
I love it. All right. Well, we're going to take a break here, and this is part A of this entire show, and we will be back with the second half, and we're going to dive into some cases and things that are going on in the state of New Hampshire, what you can be looking for, and bring you up to date with the latest and greatest.